Hi teachers, this video is going to teach you a little bit more about Google Podcasts. In order to find the Google Podcast site, you simply go to podcasts.google.com. The cool thing that I like about the Google Podcast site as compared to some of the other sites or apps out there is this I can use on a desktop, I can use on my iPhone, and I can also use it on an Android. So between all three platforms, it's going to keep track of my podcasts, and I don't have to worry about starting an episode in one place and then switching apps and it not remembering where I'm at. So that is the cool aspect of the Google Podcast. Obviously, if you're using a certain Google account, you'd want the same Google account signed in on all of your devices. So I'm going to start with the left-hand side of the Google Podcast site. Keep in mind that this site is going to have some less capabilities than the apps, but it's still got some really cool things on it. So on the left-hand side, if you open the three lines, you're going to see where you can explore shows, and then you'll also see where you can see any of the subscriptions that you have. And then down here, you'll have the option to get the Android app and or get the iOS app. So now I'm going to go over to the search. So I'm going to go back to Explore Podcasts. There is a section on here. If I keep scrolling down, I can find podcasts, top podcasts in education. But there are also lots of podcasts you can search for. So if you know the name of your podcast, and I would be sure to check out the next, some of the recommendations for some different podcasts that you might try out, or maybe you find one that someone suggests, you simply go up to the search bar and type in the name of the podcast you're looking for. So I happen to listen to House of Ed Tech because that's definitely applying to what I do. So when I listen to House of Ed Tech, you can see that I'm not currently subscribed because I usually listen to it on my iPhone in a different app. But if I subscribe to this, now when I click on my subscriptions, I see House of Ed Tech right here. And then once I start listening to one of these episodes, so we're going to go ahead and hit play.
Hi, I'm Kim Laprie from the Teachers Need Teachers podcast.
I'll find that I can skip forward and backwards by 10 seconds, and I can also change the speed of the podcast. So if you're someone that finds that the speaker speaks a little bit slower, you can speed it up. It's up to you. So 1.2 tends to be a nice rate. It speeds things up enough, but it doesn't sound like some chipmunk.
Part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting podcasts.
So you can see that it's definitely playing a lot faster. So on this, I can also visit the website. So if you're having any trouble listening to things from the Google Podcast site, you can go directly to the website. And a lot of times you can listen to the podcast right on their webpage as well. So they'll have a listen to podcast over here, and you can listen to any of these episodes. Now, the cool thing about this is I started listening to this podcast
at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Let it go a little bit more forward. Okay, so I've listened to it. I'm going to go back out. I want to search for another podcast. I happen to also like, let's see if TED Education has one. So there's TED Talks Daily, TED Talks Daily audio selection. There's a bunch of different TED options. Let's say I just want to listen to the TED Talks Daily. I can click the subscribe button. You'll notice that while I'm searching, my current episode of House of Ed Tech still stays open at the bottom. If I go to my subscriptions, let's say I'm going to listen to a new one. So I want to listen to something in TED Talks Daily. It does remember that rate that I was listening to podcasts at.
It's TED Talks Daily, and I'm your host, Elise Hu. In her work along the U.S.-Mexico border in South Texas, religious leader Norma Pimentel sees firsthand not just the heartbreaking story.
A little better. Okay, so now I want to go back to the House of Ed Tech. So if I go back to the House of Ed Tech, I'll notice I can look at this play button and you can see that it has kept track of the fact that I started this podcast. So I will also be able to open up the podcast on my phone and continue listening to it on my phone. And if you watch the phone video, you notice that he talked about you can also do this on a Google Home speaker. So Google Podcasts, you can listen to lots and lots of podcasts. If you can't find it in the Explore shows, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Sometimes you just need to search directly for it. Casey Bell happens to be another person who has a lot of good integrating technology ideas, and I've listened to her podcasts quite often as well. The Google Teacher podcast is another one you might look for. So you can play episode and then you can see a lot of the different things in the episode. Some people will explain a lot more in the episode than others. Depends on how they write their descriptions. You'll also have the option to click the 3 dots and select Mark as played to keep track of what you've done. Again, I would really strongly recommend taking the time, downloading the app on your phone or on your tablet so that you can listen to it on the go. I find that the best place to listen to podcasts tends to be, for me, in the car. Great learning opportunities, great ways to get new ideas. So hopefully you find something you're interested in and you enjoy some new podcasts.